I've been waiting all day for this. Baron, my handsome man. Hi, human. Hey, babe, you ready? All right, let's roll it.
Perfect. So welcome back to another episode of Soul Sense today, where we have a very inspiring and influential human in my life, whether he knows it or not, who showed up almost a year ago. So I'm going to introduce Jamie Belec, who is not only a teacher in the mental wellness and addiction program that I've had the privilege of experiencing this past year, but you're also the program coordinator for that program. So welcome, Jamie. And how are you doing this morning?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good, Ashley. Actually, I just want to say thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. I think it's a great initiative, and I'm really pleased to be a part of that, and also very humbled. So, but yeah, I'm actually I'm doing really well. I mean, I've been at home now for a number of weeks, and working from home and staring at my computer screen for countless hours. But I think overall I'm doing really well. Actually, I think last Friday, I think I had said to my wife, I think for the first time I feel just a little bit tired of being at home. But people are talking about Zoom fatigue and just this transition to being online and staring at their screens for lengthy time periods. So I'm really trying to practice what I preach with taking those breaks and encouraging my own wellness for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard because one of the big ways that we can stay connected is through these screens. One of the things we don't want to do is be on the screen so much. So it is a bit of a transition, but not only like Zoom fatigue, I think COVID fatigue is also something that's starting to set in with people.
Yes.
I don't know what it's like. You're in Kingston also, but I'm kind of just downtown Kingston, and I went out this weekend and it is like nothing is going on. It is absolutely like nothing has changed other than the process in which we move into stores, and people almost seem irritated about it.
Yeah.
Now, is that something also that you've noticed happening, like when you are out and about?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing a number of different things actually. And more recently, I'm seeing an increased amount of people accessing parks and being outdoors in larger numbers that I personally, I think, feel somewhat uncomfortable with. I know we do have, restrictions and I know those are changing. And yet I think it really sort of echoes what you're talking about, Ashley, with people are just a little bit fed up, I think. Um, I think commonly with issues like this, I think we get flooded with information, and I think a lot of people react. And then I think people get a little bit bored of the ongoing stories, and people start to tune out. And I think that has a couple of different effects. I think on the positive side, I think it sort of like quells the fear somewhat, but I think it does also sort of encourage what we see outside, where people are starting to gather. And I think, yeah, I think you were mentioning earlier the potential of a second wave, which is more common with this kind of um, um, an illness, that we likely will see a spike, right? But yeah, I think even with that, you were mentioning just the irritability. I am seeing that. I think that people still have a level of uncertainty, whether it's frontline workers in healthcare, or more so the frontline workers that are dealing with the general population, like the people, the cashiers and the grocery stores. And I think they're really experiencing the brunt of people's irritability. There's there's a lot of non-standardization with how different organizations are responding to being safe and wanting to protect their workers and wanting to protect the public. And I think that's contributing to some of that irritability with the general population. There's no standardization, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think people are irritable.
Yeah, I think that, for a lot of reasons, and you say like the frontline workers, I think when you talk about the cashiers, my heart almost immediately breaks thinking about how many irritable people they may encounter in a day. And then when we start to think about the impact that we're having on other people's mental health, just by all trying to feel what we feel is valid. And it's not to say that what people are feeling isn't valid. Being irritable, feeling all of these things, everything that we're all going through is valid. But the weight that actually puts onto other people and the impact that we can have now, not only on our own mental health, but on other people's mental health. So if you were to be able to say something, Jamie, to those people who are going out and who are a little bit irritable when they're engaging with other people, what is maybe a piece of advice or something that you would say to them as someone who's frustrated and feels like, just that next person is the target of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think that to be over simplistic, I think to be able to remember kindness, right? It's such a fundamental thing that we all want to have experienced in our own lives when those extend kindness, and to remember that this is but a season, and so when we go out, a part of equipping ourselves, with the physical protection, I think we need to remember how can I extend kindness and put on that not only that emotional protection, but to be able to extend that to others. There's value in being showing and being compassionate towards other people. When we're irritable, when we're not having a good day, and we go out and we can offer a little bit of a glimmer of hope to other people by kindness and compassion, I think it does wonders for our own wellness and our own mental health. And it certainly makes a huge difference in somebody else's day. And I think just clothing yourself with kindness and compassion, in addition to the mask. One of the things that we, when we put on our mask, where, we really cover a large percentage of how we communicate with others. And I think that, people don't see that smile. People don't see that frown either. But I think we're learning to communicate differently. In fact, I think there's masks that are being made now that are actually clear, so you can see people's expressions, because it's such a fundamental way of how we communicate, right?
Yeah.
To illustrate
I think that's a beautiful way of saying it, and to remember that one small act of kindness, even in a negative moment that we're feeling, has such a tremendous impact, right? Like that grocery store worker that has maybe taken the brunt of everybody else's shit all day needs a smile, needs to know that the thing they're doing, putting themselves out there to support themselves, their family, putting themselves in harm's way in some way, is valued. Which is also something I think that I've been trying to implement, is when I have those interactions, saying, I appreciate you. Like, I appreciate that you're doing this today so that I can be here to do that. Yeah.
Being intentional, right?
Yeah. I'm curious. So you did mention before that you're actually starting to get a little bit bored of home, which I don't think I ever would have maybe heard you say, but I'm curious, because you're also a dad. So what is it like being at home, not only with your wife, but with your kids and teenage kids, and how are they doing? I have a niece who's 18 who missed graduation, who missed prom, who can't figure out why in her 18 years this happens now at her big, profound moments. So what's it like at your house with 4 of them?
Yeah, well, let me tell you. First of all, I just want to say that my heart goes out to your niece who's missing her graduation, because my oldest daughter also is graduating this year, who will be missing out. But just to backpedal briefly, I'm certainly not bored at home. think I'm tired of being at home. So
Okay,
big time.
okay, my
Like
apologies.
I pine for the days of boredom. Actually, I've said that a
That's
few times. I can't remember the last time I felt bored, but
that's a good
actually,
question.
yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I was I it was on at some point on the weekend where I actually was up and able to sit on my couch and just read a book that I wanted to read for enjoyment, and I was like, this is amazing. Like it felt really good. Um, but yeah, to answer your question about what it's like at home, I mean, firstly, I think I'm very blessed because I mean I have four kids and three. So I have an 18-year-old daughter, a 17-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old daughter, and a soon-to-be 12-year-old young man. Yeah, and so I've got my quiver's full, and I have a lovely wife, and I think in addition to that, I think we're blessed also because we have job security in this season, where I know a lot of people don't have that, and I think a lot of people are struggling and have been forced to be creative and have to tap into other resources. They're not in the same situation as myself. So sort of on the outset, I'm really thankful for that. Now, with regard to being at home with my family, I think it's an interesting time for sure because like I mean, my oldest daughter, she's actually taken to working full time and continuing on with her online schooling, because that's the format of high school right now. And so she's stretching herself, but I think she's doing good things, and I think she knows her limits. And I think she has her head screwed on fairly tight with her academics, so she's very motivated. And then my second oldest daughter just recently started working part-time at the same place as my oldest daughter. And so she's actually really enjoying the social aspect of that. She's our social butterfly, and I think um, school has been the hardest hit for her because Katie has been she's very much a social person, and she's that extrovert that really feeds off of being around other people. And so being at home has been a really hard hit for her. And so this has been a welcome change for her actually to work part-time, have that social connection, and then actually make a little bit of money. Um, and then when school announced that they were actually going to be finishing the year off, with distance education, I think at that point she threw her hands up in the air and said, "This is an all-school homework stoppage. I'm not doing it." He was kidding, but I totally appreciate that. Sort of having the rug pulled out from underneath you. She was holding on for hope to go back to school to connect socially. My youngest daughter, she's thriving in this online format, and she's been very committed up at our dining room table regularly with her school issued Chromebook, and has been really dedicated to absorbing herself into her studies. And one of the teachers actually had commented, I think, on her through an email saying, "You're one of the few people that are actually doing the work," which is interesting to me on a whole other level because, I think having an established norm and structure in your routine in your day to day is critically important for your well-being. When you remove structure, we run into problems. When we have a lack of structure, we tend to kind of get a little bit side railed. So, anyways, sidetracking a little bit there. My youngest guy, I think he's probably the most bored out of everybody. He has three teenage sisters that are very busy doing a number of things, and then his workload from a school perspective is fairly light, and then his as a young man, nearly 12, he likes to do things. He likes to be physically active, and so not having his little buddies to come around with and to be connected to and going out to do things has been really challenging, I think, for him. So yeah, and then with my wife, I think, working in healthcare, she works in management at the cancer center. And man, I've seen her being stretched tremendously with the changes she's having to implement at her job. And so things have really sort of ramped up for her. She's finding a groove now, but for a number of weeks, it was working from home. Well, not from home. She would go in and then work again once she got home. And I think that was pretty taxing for her. She's a real, likes things consistent, doesn't like a lot of change. So it's been a really big hit for her. And then I'm just like kind of like floating around through all of it and continuing on, working from home and planning and having meetings. And so I see a lot of this stuff going on that it feels almost like it's a little bit distal to me. And yet it's certainly going on, and I see the impact of COVID-19 with the people around me. You had mentioned just people being irritable. Just a real quick story on that. If I could chime in a bit on that. I went to a local store, a grocery store, and when I got to my turn in line, the girl at the till. This is just on Friday, I think. And she was like holding back tears, and I just stopped and I said, "Oh, like you're having a hard day?" And she's like, "No, I'm going to be fine." And again, she's like, pulling these tears and trying to, keep herself composed. And I said, "Is somebody at work giving you a hard time?" And she's like, No. I said, "A customer?" And she's like, "Yeah, like a customer had called her a name and like swore at her and raised her voice to her, and she's like a minimum wage worker at a local grocery store, and so my heart, I was just like, wow, this is like, this isn't right. And I let her know that, that says a lot more about that person than it does about her. I said, and then I'm, just how I think, maybe a little bit differently than some, I said, tell me one thing that you're going to do to take care of yourself tonight. And she's like, "Oh, no, don't worry." I'm like, "No, I'm not going to leave this spot here until you tell me one thing you're going to do." I said, "When do you get off work?" And she's like, "In a couple hours." And I said, "Well, what are you going to do when you get home to take care of yourself and make sure that you're going to be okay?" And she said, "Well, I have a dog that I can cuddle up with." And I said, "Go home after work." And I'm like, "Just love your dog, love on your dog, and maybe watch some Netflix, But an interaction like that is something anybody can do, to connect. We need those connection points. And I think that can help turn the tide of this irritability that so many people are experiencing.
Are feeling. And I agree. And it isn't even just in that. I find when I cross paths with people in the park walking my dog, although we're socially distant and I have my mask on, I'm just like, "Hi, like talk to me. Like I just want to talk to. I don't know you, but I want to talk to you," because it is that thing that we're missing. But there's something just so brilliant in saying that and just having those conversations with people. What is the coolest thing that you've done at home with your family that you didn't maybe do before, that now being together for this amount of time, you've actually started doing more as a family, like something that you're not going to let go of if you don't have to?
Well, I mean, we've certainly, we've really taken to walking, like walking together as a family in the evening. And I don't know if that's the coolest thing, but that's definitely something. I mean, we've kind of done that before, but I think we are a little bit more intentional with doing that. I think one fun thing that we did was that we actually we blindfolded our 4 kids and we put them in our vehicle, our van, and then we drove into the heart of Kingston, like in some sort of subdivision area that we've never really been to, while they were blindfolded, and we meandered throughout the process of getting to this sort of like this cul-de-sac in the middle of suburbia Kingston, and then we took off their blindfolds and said, "Okay, you have to tell us how to get home now." So, that was probably the coolest thing we've done, because they were like completely lost, and I'm behind the wheel, and I'm like, "Just tell me where you want me to turn," and
Where I'm going.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. And I think at that point, I think we're able to even stop at a McDonald's on the way home and get like an ice cream or everything kind of thing. So that was definitely the coolest thing we did. Yeah.
I
I'm
I
so
think that
fully domesticated.
it's so you're just in it now. I think also one of the things that people have been saying, or that I've been getting, because I don't have kids in or family or that type of dynamic, in the sense, but with meals at home together. So one of the things that they never got to do is like all of these meals that we get to have together, and how family households maybe are feeling a little bit more like they would have in the 70s, before everybody kind of got into this wave of screens and time and all of that sort of thing. So I want to pivot a little bit, Jamie, because I want to get your opinion as well. So recently, over the past few weeks, I have lost a friend to substance use and addiction in this time of COVID. And a big piece of me really truly believes that this human was sort of a victim of the circumstance of COVID in the ways in which their support systems didn't exist anymore. So there are people who aren't having the best time in this situation, and things have been very difficult because we don't have these support groups where we used to be in person, or the ways of doing that. And there are a lot of people struggling right now with mental wellness and addiction. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, what you could offer up to people who are going through this right now at home, and who are in those places, who aren't, this time of isolation is actually more dangerous for them.
Yeah. That's a really tough question to answer, Ashley. I think that they really are like this vulnerable population that exists. I mean, even folks that so people that are using substances, and folks that are precariously housed, or even homeless. I think this is probably a really challenging population to engage and encourage and facilitate wellness toward. And I wish there was an easy answer to this, because for many, the avenue of wellness is seemingly this kind of a format, this kind of an interaction, right? And so for people that don't have ready access to a device that they can tap into for support, it becomes a significant barrier, right? And I think I mean, our local government, provincial government, I think I think they are really trying to take active steps, acknowledging that this is a barrier, and pouring funding towards programming that can help reach out to connect to these vulnerable populations. And so I think a lot of it has to do with messaging, and how we can get messaging out to our community people, that there are supports that are available. There are people that are wanting to connect. There are outreach programs that are really wanting to ensure that these folks are having their needs met, right? But it is challenging, and I think that there is no real easy answer, except that that perseverance of outreach and connection to these vulnerable people is critical, right? I don't know if that really adequately answers what you're asking me, but
I don't know, like you said, if there's one sort of direct answer. I know, and I guess maybe also because I haven't heard so much, and I've been sort of searching for a bit of the answers myself. But in the beginning of what this pandemic was, what we did in the city, they sort of transformed an old retirement home. They opened it up to the vulnerable population so that we could keep them safe, and we could do those things. And I think that it was accepted, and there was resistance to it by the people who it was available for, because also to them, you're thinking you've been in this situation where you are homeless or you're vulnerable, you're living this way, and there was no one there helping you. And then all of a sudden, like, what's happening, we're providing these facilities, but there's this trust issue that they're also having in that. But do you know of anything like how those programs or facilities that they've set up are working in the city of Kingston? Do you know, sort of maybe firsthand or through colleagues of your own, how those have been received?
like in terms of the client population that would be using them, how has it been received? I don't know. I could probably reach out to a couple of peers of mine that are working in the field right now, to get a more accurate picture of what the response has been.
Mhm.
Towards the front line or towards these programs that have now been put into place. But I fully appreciate the question around trust, right? I mean, and that is like a multifaceted issue uh, with this vulnerable population is trust to begin with. This is like pre-COVID, but certainly
Yep.
looking at how the surfacing of these different programs kind of out of nowhere, it would seem, um, might not be well understood by these populations. I think that it's interesting because from a healthcare provider perspective, what I see is this is the result of uh, um, a fragmented system at best, coming together out of need, right? And you have, it's like you have multiple partners that work in a fragmented system. But then when you have this common purpose, sort of like, everybody banding together to battle against their common enemy, right? Which would be the COVID-19. I think that a lot of work can get done, and a lot of work, like you look at resources left, right, and center. It's amazing how much mental wellness has really been thrown into the forefront of COVID-19, which is amazing. I love seeing this, and I think it's the product of this, like, a common vision and a common purpose among many stakeholders, community partners that say, you know what, we need to put, like, everything aside, and we need to work together to overcome this. And so, like, from a user of the system perspective, there it might not be well communicated in terms of, like, processes, and I mean, it may be not even very relevant to understand the processes behind it. But it does seem like, kind of out of nowhere, all of a sudden there's these resources, and it can even cause a little bit of, well, where were you before, when I was, like, homeless, and when I was, using my substances, and there were no supports for me, right? I think it's just a funneling of attention, and recognizing that when we work together, we can accomplish so many great things. The next step is sustainability, right? How is this going to look moving forward? And I think this is where the planning phase is happening now, with especially with the mental health and addictions sector. They're looking at, we've done all these things. How can we sustain, and how are our services going to look moving forward? It's sort of the next question that's being tackled right now in healthcare, for sure.
Right. And I think that's important also to, and coming back to the trust issue with vulnerable populations, moving them into these types of facilities. And then the question for me is, what happens when COVID is over? Then all of a sudden we're removing those resources that they have, and they're going back to that place. And is that, they're the place where we lose this population again, or maybe where they have had an opportunity to be in a bit of recovery, or to be in a different situation? And then what does that look like? And can we sustain what we're providing them now, as opposed to after? So that's a big question I have as well. And then I think this also too has actually shown us the holes in where we've neglected to put mental health on the forefront of what's happening, not just with the vulnerable population, but with everyone, in all of the ways in which the conversation is creeping up, and we're starting to recognize it more and more. I mean, I think I was 12 when I was diagnosed with a mental wellness issue. And at which point, even then, my parents were like, that isn't a thing, like that, right. Just being there. So I believe the conversation is ramping up, and it's becoming more and more important. And this is where I'd like to see us putting that mental health piece more ahead of physical health, and ahead of, because they all work together. But I think that that's really important for us to not let that, get pulled back at all. And just the resources that we put into the mental health program, I would love to see them continue to ramp up, so that we all have the resource.
Ashley, I totally agree with you. I mean, I might be a bit biased because of my passion for mental health and addiction, but I think that I mean, we ask, is this sustainable, what we're doing now, right? And not even necessarily from a programming perspective with mental health and addictions, but just the way we're living right now, and putting safety mechanisms into place. How sustainable are these processes, right? And to sort of jump back a bit to the, having programs in place now and then maybe not having them when this is all over, it could be a bit of a misnomer, because I think the mindset of our healthcare providers is that this is our new reality, and this is, this is the new world that we're living in. It reminds me somewhat of when 9/11 happened. It's sort of to parallel the what I'm talking about. It was sort of this new way of thinking around terrorism, and we live in a new world now, and we think differently. We think more, in terms of safety, and so this is sort of like a very similar kind of a thing where I don't think that, I mean, like COVID itself will subside. There will be another one in a number of years that will come, and that's just the wave that happens with these with these different illnesses. But I think that what it does is it like I think moving forward, I think programming will change. It'll be more sustainable as the planning occurs at this point, to say how are we going to modify services? How will service delivery look? Because I don't think it's going to be a matter of going back to the way things were necessarily. It will be, how can we take what we've modified and adapted now and make it sustainable? Speaking with a couple of local community stakeholders around this next phase of planning, and just that a lot of good has actually come out of how they provide services. Is it perfect? No. I think we think about it like this, to look at it maybe an analogy. If you take a rock, here's the situation, and you throw the rock, you pretty much know where it's going to land, and you can build processes saying, yeah, the rock is going to land over there. What's happening right now is that we kind of have we're holding onto a bird right now, and when we let that bird go, we have no idea where it's going to land, right? We can hypothesize, and we can estimate, we can theorize, but we don't really know. And so there's no real quick and easy answer, which makes it challenging. But what it does is it keeps our healthcare program designs, keeps the planners at least on their toes with how are we going to do things. And so we're, right now, that, like I was saying, there's a lot of good that has sort of come from this new way of delivering services. How can they take the good from this and build good processes into the delivery of programming? I think in especially with mental health and addictions, the critical piece is the human connection. I mean, we're talking right now and we're connecting, but it's not like you and me sitting in a room together and having a conversation, right? And that is so vitally important to our vulnerable folks that suffer with mental health issues, that suffer with addiction. And so that's the new planning phase, as restrictions widen, to say how are we gonna do this safely, and yet keep some of the stuff that we've been doing, that we've been forced to do, right? And so we'll see how that's going to look as we move forward into the fall, into the into the coming year, for sure.
Right. So circling back to mental wellness, because not only has it been a big thing moving through COVID, we're now moving into a bit of a different event that's happening all over the world. And it's happening from the situation that happened with George Floyd and everything that's going on. And I feel it covers my skin in goosebumps, and it brings tears to my eyes. What's happening around us right now. But what are your thoughts on that conversation that's going on? And what are your thoughts on the perspective, I mean, here we are sitting, a white female, a white male who have grown up in a very different situation than maybe what others are experiencing. So how can you sort of relate to that uncomfortable or difficult conversation that we need to have now and people's mental wellness surrounding that?
Yeah, that's a really big question. You're throwing the big ones at me today. I like it.
Yeah, I'm like,
Um,
I got you for the first time in a couple months. I need
that's
answers.
good. It's good. Um, yeah, I mean, to break it down, I mean, I think like I'm I'm a bit of an outsider. Like, you sort of acknowledge just our own kind of cultural privilege, if you could call it that. Where I'm I'm not. I'm not a black person living in the United States. I I feel like I'm looking in through a window that's not very clear. Although, you can almost connect. I think there's been racial tensions uh, in the United States that bubble up and percolate and have seemingly not really gone away. And this kind of an event is really sort of a triggering event for I think how people are feeling about this this issue with culture and ethnicity. And I think that we look at there's Kevin Cameron. He does the threat assessment protocols, and he debunked the theory called snap theory. When somebody says, oh well, they were doing really well and they just snapped, and
Right.
then they lost it, and so he was really able to really debunk this theory that people snap, because they don't. And if I could put that same theory onto what's happening, certainly nationally, but even internationally, I think there's been an international response to what's happened. And we're even hearing about in Canada things that have cropped up and protests that have cropped up that are garnering attention. But I think that people, if you think about it in terms of a level of things that are going on in people's lives, right? Whether it's stress in the home, stress in relationships, stress with children, like work, losing your job, adverse changes happening at work, and these things kind of build up, and to a level where we have a threshold of, what, this is just one more thing that's being put on top here, and that's sort of the boiling point, or the breaking point for people, right? And so I think of COVID as really this, contributing to layers of um, of stress that people are experiencing, right? And so you're as the pressures are continuing to mount and things are changing and people are experiencing stressors, it's like this continuous bending. And I think what we're seeing in a lot of people is this sort of ventilation of things that have been percolating. And this is not necessarily an excuse, because it's certainly a real issue that's happened, a real concern, obviously. But this has been that for many people, that one thing that has pushed past that threshold of being able to cope in a healthy way. And so it's alarming, right? Because I think that the racial issue has been an ongoing issue, not in the United States, but certainly globally, right? I mean, there's with a lot of immigration and people fleeing from countries and going to new countries, I think we're seeing this global issue of ethnicity and yeah, it's one more thing that people have put on their plate that for many it's been a breaking point, and that's what we're seeing, really. Uh,
I think you say for many people it's something that they're putting on their plate, but I think it's something that needs to be on everybody's plate. And I think even the way that the conversation and the dynamics of those conversations are changing within our homes. I've had this conversation. I grew up in a very small town that was predominantly white, where I feel I was unknowingly ignorant to what was going on. And based on what we were learning in school, based on the questions I was asking or things that were being given to me. And I don't think I ever grew up in a racist household by any means. I don't believe my parents actually ever saw color, but I think just in that statement is what makes it an issue for me, because that's where my re-education has to come in. And I stand behind that, and knowing that, I've made this promise to myself that I will re-educate myself, and I will go back and start at the beginning to do that. And so that I can continue to educate myself, because it isn't anyone else's responsibility but my own. To do that. How have the conversations or have they changed in your home with your family? Is that something that you are touching down on around the dinner table? And, it's like they're saying, it's not so much to say we're not racist. We need to be anti-racist at this point. And what are we doing to do that? What are the conversations you're having with your family?
Yeah, and so, I mean, and that's really what it is. It's like we have, like, within our own home, is just really having those roundtable conversations, right? And getting our kids thinking about, what's going on and people's responses to what's going on. And I think what's really interesting, Ashley, is that our kids are really able to bring it back to our own Canadian perspective. And by that, I mean, really learning to acknowledge the issues within our own country around our Indigenous peoples. And I think that what this is sort of doing is really bringing back the what's happened and what's happening in our own within our own country, even with how we've addressed, when I say we, as sort of like settler allies, with our Indigenous peoples, our Inuit, our First Nations, our Métis peoples, as a collective, and look at culturally what's happened over the years, and how we're the things that were done over the years, that I think for the large part, most people are really relatively unaware of, just the level of pain and suffering that we've caused our Indigenous peoples. And so I think that we look at what's going on in the United States, and we certainly talk very openly about what is our response in all of this, and what where do we fit in with the response with all of this, and then again, just bringing it back to how we've affected our Indigenous peoples, and really promoting an awareness and understanding with the sort of the long tragic history of how we've mistreated the founding people, or the original people of our own country, right? So yeah, I think it's good for us to sharpen each other, and to have our kids be attuned to what's happening. We use our social media as the mechanism of getting a barometer for what's happening. Using our kids use Instagram, and I use Twitter, and we look at the news feeds and look at their friends' responses, and just who they're following, and some less than healthy responses to what's happened in Minnesota and nationally. And I think making it a conversation is key, right? And just like making sure that our home is a safe place to talk about these real sensitive issues that could just really escape us if we don't seize those moments and have conversations.
That's it's a fantastic approach to have, and I think that's really important for all of us, is if the conversation makes us uncomfortable, then we actually need to have it. It's like anything in life, right? If we're uncomfortable, we're growing, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned this year through school and through all of you as well, is that if it's uncomfortable, we need to talk about it. even more so than things that we feel really comfortable and really passionate about
Mhm.
talking about. That's where our strength lies. And so it is having those. Jamie, it's been a pleasure. Time with you flies by so quickly.
Oh.
So
Ah.
yeah, we just moved so quickly through that. And like I said, just your voice, your opinion, what it is that you're sharing has such a tremendous impact on not only us as students, but in the world with your kids. I feel really lucky that we have the chance for them to spread the ripple effect of you and also who they are through this. So I just can't tell you enough how much I appreciate your time and landing with me today.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the fall. I know what isn't in person, but again, through this dynamic, we'll adapt to the change and do the best we can.
You're resilient, and I think we're resilient, and I just really want to say thanks for letting me be a part of this, and I look forward to I mean, you are so creative and you are a go-getter, and I love to see how you take an idea and you give it some teeth and you give it some wheels, and it rolls forward, and I'm looking forward to see how this is going to land. I have one question for you though.
Sure.
What is one thing you're going to do today to take care of yourself?
Today I'm going to spend time with my dog. That actually is my, so I have a really great self-care routine.
Yeah.
To be honest, I have about a 2.5-hour window every day that's just set out for me in all the ways from moving to, quiet time to learning. I'm very lucky. Me and my roommate also have every day what we call learning hour. So we shut everything off and we open an audiobook and we open the hard copy, and we're actually working through the placebo effect right now, which is a really interesting thing. But every day for me, absolutely without question, is my dog. He is my walking meditation and my chance to see the world through a really innocent set of eyes, if that makes sense.
It sure does. I love it.
It's like,
thanks.
Yeah, there's nothing like a stick. I tell you, we just get so excited about that.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? The sticks in nature, we just all lose our minds. Jamie, always a pleasure, and I look forward to landing with you again. And I hope that you're enjoying our finally newly brought on spring that we're getting. So.
I'm loving it. I sure am. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Okay, you take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
You too. Bye.